sign-in sheet. And now the recording is in progress. In case you didn't know. Thank you. So we left off in our binders with the texts for this unit, attitudes toward the land. And we looked at the first two texts, which feature the opening verses of chapter 12 of Genesis and Rashi's commentary on the very beginning of the Bible. In other words, why do we have why don't we just start the Torah with laws, right? Well, because we have to know that there is a connection to the land. The land is central to the Jewish story. So we are up to number 3, right? So number 3 begins another approach to the idea of land, which is the idea that the Torah presents a system for law for a sovereign nation in a land, right? After all, we don't call them the 10 suggestions, right? They're laws, right? And there's a bunch of other laws as well.
It's funny.
It's what's not funny is how people treat them as suggestions. There's a flaw there somewhere, right? So, okay, so here, text number 3, Deuteronomy says, as Moses speaking from God, see, I have imparted to you laws and rules, as the Lord my God has commanded me, for you to abide by in the land that you are about to enter and occupy.
Maybe we're
It's in this much in our binders today. Okay, but we are on page 36. Yes, good luck. So here, the connection between the land and Judaism is, this is the place where you're really supposed to keep the law, right? That's there's this strong relationship between the people of Israel and the Torah of Israel and the land of Israel. They all go together, right? And this is carried on further in Deuteronomy. Look at text number 4, okay? V'zot ha-mitzvah. This is the mitzvah, the commandment. It translates it as instruction, but 37, right? So this is the mitzvah, the laws and the rules that the Lord your God has commanded me to impart to you, to be observed in the land that you are to cross over and occupy. It's about doing the Torah in the land. Right? Right? So that's the purpose of the Torah. It's tied up with the land. Yes.
The English word occupy here in the Hebrew, it's used in both 3 and 4. Is the Hebrew the same word that would be, say, appearing in a modern Israeli newspaper when they're talking about the occupation of the West Bank?
No, it's not. And in fact, I kind of question the use of occupy as the translation here. The verb is yoresh. Okay? Anybody heard the word Yerusha?
Yeah, that's an inheritance.
An inheritance, very good. Right? So, yeah, well, no, it's not related.
It's the root. It's the root.
That's from a different root. It sounds the same. So points for you, Bob, but not full credit.
Story of my life.
Wow. Sorry, Bob.
Almost.
Didn't mean to shove it in.
No, it's not- no, never,
But-
never zero. But
No, yeah, but yeah, Yerusha means an inheritance. So here, that it really suggests that you're going into the land that you will inherit. No, that who assigned it to them? Who willed it to them? God, right? I'm not sure why they are uncomfortable with that translation. You know, but to occupy, I don't see that.
So when they refer to it in modern Hebrew, they're not using that same word then?
No,
Okay.
No.
Got it, thanks.
okay. So, let's go to number 5, just to finish this little piece, where it says, "These are the laws and rules you must carefully observe in the land that the Lord God of your fathers is giving you to possess." And there it does translate Larishta from Yoresh, the way I suggested. It's giving you to possess as long as you live on earth. Right? So this is, the idea is that the Torah is the system for law in the land. All right? It's a political system as well as a legal system, because it's designed for the land you're going to be living in. Yes,
So what happened when they went to Babylonia? Because that wasn't their land.
no. So they took what they could of their religion with them without sacrificing the idea that they might one day go back. Now, of course, what happened was a whole lot of people got real settled in Babylonia, and they saw that they could keep Judaism alive there too. And you say, I got a business now, we're making a good living. It's like, just because the state of Israel opened up in 1948 didn't mean that American Jews automatically said, oh, well, it's time to go back. Some did, obviously, but most did not. And that was true in Babylonia when Cyrus, the Persian emperor who had conquered Babylonia, said, you guys want to go back, rebuild walls, you're welcome to. And people said, wow, that's great. But most of them stayed.
It seems like a very narrow definition. Because when you're saying the land in this respect, you're talking specifically about Israel.
Yes. So just remember that there are multiple definitions of Judaism. Right? This is one definition of Judaism that says, we have a Torah and we have a land, and our destiny is to live the Torah in the land. Right? But, we did evolve, ways to live outside too. Right? But clearly Deuteronomy says that's the goal. Right? And that explains why people who are very settled in another place would think about going back when the opportunity presents itself. Comments or questions up to here?
The Jews from Babylonia are the Iraqi Jews that.
Well, yeah, I mean, that evolved over a very long period of time, but the Babylonian community was the primary diaspora community for about 1,500 years.
Is that because they could basically walk from
From Israel?
Yeah.
No, I think proximity had something to do with it, but just being settled and having developed institutions was the main factor. Now, once you have a working Jewish community, and a working way of life that you're free to maintain. Because even, Nebuchadnezzar didn't really care that much if Jews observed Judaism in Babylonia. He was a little more pluralist than the average in his time. So that worked out reasonably well. And so, we have two Talmuds, but the one that most people spend time studying is the Babylonian Talmud, right? Which is written, I should say, is edited around the early 7th century. Okay? So that, by that time, it means they've already been in Babylonia for well over 1,000 years. So,
7th century AD,
I'm sorry?
edited in the 7th century.
Yeah, 7th
AD.
century of the Common Era.
And Common Era, yeah, Common Era, sorry.
So, Babylonia has an enormously powerful diaspora community and institutions that work to preserve and develop Judaism until sometime in the early 2nd millennium, so 11th century, economic situation changed, and there were opportunities elsewhere, notably Europe, and so people moved along. Jews went to Italy, Jews went to France, Jews went to Germany. Didn't always go well in Europe, right? But there were opportunities there.
Are there any Jews left in Iraq now?
Very, very few, if any. There's no real community there, right?
Rabbi, there's a wonderful movie, and I think I heard about it at Beth Yeshurun. I may even have a copy of it, called The David Project. And what they do is they trace the Jews' immigration from the Middle East to Israel, and they talk about maybe 10 years ago, I forget when the movie was made. This was in response, whatever, but they talk about there were 300,000 Jews in Iran, and now there's 4. At the end, it's just
Not
startling.
400,000.
4.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just startling.
Well, what happened was there were tens of thousands of Jews in Iran until the revolution, and the Ayatollahs made it very clear what they were going to do with the Jews. And the Jews took them at their word, and they left. They got out as quick as they could, many of them leaving behind most of their wealth, a lot of which was in property, of course. Yeah. So at any rate, Babylonia was a very strong Jewish community for a long, long time. But they never gave up on the centrality of the land of Israel. Okay, let's go to the next piece. Another explanation for the connection of the Jewish people with the land. And it comes out of this interpretation of Leviticus by Nachmanides, Ramban. It is the land of Israel being the place where you meet God. Now, you had this before when you had the temple, because the temple was the place where you went to see God. Now, you and I all know that you can't see God, but they didn't get that memo back then. Without an appointment. Even without an appointment, right? But they didn't know that. They went to the temple and they saw God. certainly experience the presence of God. So here's how the book of Leviticus describes it. And actually, I want to do this from here because there's, let's see where yeah. So this is Leviticus chapter 18, beginning with the reading you have in front of you with verse 24. Okay, so it says, do not defile yourselves in any of those ways, all the ways that we read about on Yom Kippur afternoon, by the way. Right? All the don'ts, the big don'ts in terms of sexual behavior that's inappropriate. For it is by such that the nations I am casting out before you defiled themselves. And then the land became defiled, and I called it to account for its iniquity, and the land spewed out its inhabitants. Imagine that. It just vomited them out, right? Well, the explanation for that would be that if the land itself has a certain degree of purity, it will not tolerate impurity. Right? It's like if you would, and those of you who studied in the other class with me, we looked at Isaiah 6. I remember when Isaiah experienced the I'm a man of unclean lips among a people of unclean lips, and what am I doing up here in this pure realm, right? So they were able to fix that for him, but but most of us don't get such a quick fix, right? The angels don't work with us personally. So if you're in this pure land and you do something that is violently impure, like spews you out, won't tolerate it, right? But you must keep my laws and my rules, and you must not do any of these abhorrent things. Neither the citizen nor the stranger who resides among you, it's like it's not just Jews, right? This land will not tolerate certain things, right? For all those abhorrent things were done by the people who were in the land before you. And the land became defiled. So let not the land spew you out for defiling it, as it spewed out the nation that came before you. That's why the Canaanites got kicked out, right? Just wouldn't have it. All who do any of those abhorrent things, such persons shall be cut off from their people. Now, living in the diaspora, we think, if you want to be cut off from your people, you have to work pretty hard. Right? You have to do something really bad to where the Jewish people will kick you out. Oh no, you can't join our synagogue. We're happy to have you join the synagogue. Sinners all invited. Yeah. So none of us are perfect, so we all get to come in. But this is different. In the land, if you do certain bad things, you will be, it's like having an ejection seat mechanism. I joke with people that, they shouldn't sit in my seat in the chapel if they get there before me, because it's the only one in the room with an ejection mechanism. Right? This is the land with an ejection mechanism.
But it never ejects people.
Don't test it.
How often does this law actually enforce, or
I can't answer that. I don't know. But the perception is more important than the reality.
It's God calling.
Yeah, I know. And
Did they answer right now?
yeah.
Got some more questions if that's okay.
Keep them on the line, yeah, we'll a lot of questions.
They're not the only one that
Well,
Let it go to voicemail.
God, your own voicemail.
Yeah. Spam risk.
Yeah, 1 moment, this just requires a short. Very short. So.
It just strikes me, Rabbi, that if it wasn't for us, the way you just described it, the land would be empty. I mean, like you said, we're all.
Oh, no, we're all sinners. But it takes a really bad sin.
No, I mean,
Children,
the people at the
sacrifice.
time that this was written, if they actually enforced that law.
It isn't that they enforce the law, it is that God
Oh, I
enforces
see,
the law.
okay. I got it.
Right? You know, I'm the prime minister of Israel, or I'm the king, or the governor, or whatever. I don't enforce those things, right? But God will. God will take care of it because it's His land. And He's leasing it to you, but only,
Just as long as you live.
yeah, for the low, low price of obedience, yes. Right? Yeah, Lou.
This verse about being interpreted as God expelling the Canaanites, is that a forecast, or is that looked at as a historical event in the way that the Torah was composed, with Leviticus being written whenever it was?
I would say that Leviticus was written after the Canaanites were expelled from the land, and therefore it's more after the fact. Maybe you can, it's meant to be read as predictive.
And those who accept that the Torah as it is was given to Moses would look at it that way.
Yeah. So, let's see what Ramban has to say about this. In other words, the way you have to look at this is that while God is God everywhere, there's only one space that's under God's direct governance, and that's the land of Israel, right? If you want to remain there, you better toe the line. I mean, mistakes, understandable. Some mistakes, really bad mistakes, not tolerated. Yeah. So here is how Ramban interprets the verse. Thus the land became defiled, and I called it to account for its iniquity, and the land spewed out its inhabitants. He says, the Torah was very stringent with regard to forbidden sexual practices on account of the land which would be defiled by these practices, and consequently vomit out the perpetrators of these deeds. Now, he asked the question, so why would the land become defiled when forbidden sexual practices are incumbent upon people anywhere and have no connection to the land? The explanation is that while God is the creator of all, He assigned for every people and land a star or a constellation, as we have learned through astrology. I think what he means by this is every land has a certain destiny. Okay, and maybe if it's helpful to think of it that way, easier than looking at it as an astrological forecast. Regarding this, it is written, these the Lord your God allotted to other peoples. He apportioned to each one their constellations in the heavens. Now God is God of gods, the Lord of lords of the whole world, but the land of Israel, which is, in case you didn't know, in the center of the earth, that's what Ramban believed anyway, is God's portion. designated exclusively to God's name. He did not designate any angels as having power and authority over it when he gave this land to his people who are committed to the unity of his name, the descendants of the patriarchs. Regarding this, he said, "You shall be my treasured possession among all the peoples, for all the earth is mine." And it is further written, "You shall be my people, I will be your God." We saw that before. "You shall not be subjugated to other divine forces at all." Therefore, the land which is God's inheritance will vomit out all those who defile it, cannot tolerate idol worshippers nor sexual transgressors. About all these, he said, "Do not defile yourself in any of those ways," etc. Okay? So, this explains, at least in Ramban's view, why the land has this special power, that it just will not tolerate certain kinds of transgression. Yeah, right.
Where does homosexuality fit into this?
It did, okay? Whether it still does today, well, gee, the culture has changed. So, and interestingly, in Israel today, while homosexuality is not tolerated within the Haredi community, they do not seem to be concerned about the existence of it elsewhere in the land. So there's been an evolution there too, even among the ultra-Orthodox. Now, and that changes from time to time. But in general, there's no longer the feeling that this is totally unacceptable within the land, right? As opposed to, let's say, people who don't keep Shabbos, right? Now, you will from time to time find people in the Haredi community who get very offended because people don't keep Shabbos and they're driving their cars on the streets on Shabbos, and they throw stones at you, right? Yeah, well,
Shabbos was coming.
yeah. But there is less of that than there once was. And as far as homosexuality, it's like, bad, it's bad. But we're only worried about it within our own community.
Go to Tel Aviv, get out of Jerusalem.
Yeah,
That's right.
well,
Exactly.
yeah, there is much more of it in Tel Aviv than in Jerusalem.
Yeah.
Though, trust me, you can find it in Jerusalem too.
Sure you can.
Other comments or questions up to here? So here's a different approach to the land of Israel and our Jewish connection with it. This is the place where God has set up certain rules, and the land itself has this ejection mechanism for certain bad things. Right?
Rabbi,
Yeah.
would it be a reasonable interpretation that this is the punishment for the abomination of sexual prohibitions as opposed to being stoned? The punishment.
No,
being
if they catch you,
expulsion?
they'll stone you anyway. Right? Yeah, I mean, if they can do that to you, they will. But this is a different step, right? This is like, the land having an allergy to certain transgressions. Right? The other is more, well, you're breaking the law. This is what our Torah says we do to people who break that law. And so this is what we're going to do to you, right? But that's not an ejection mechanism. See the difference?
No, that's okay.
Yeah.
But I don't want to take up.
No, the one is a legal system and legal steps that are taken to enforce that system. The other is quasi-magical. Okay? It's like the earth of the land of Israel is allergic to these things and it will eject you.
Yeah, my question is God saying that that ejection, expulsion, vomiting out is the punishment for the behavior?
Actually, no, I think it is not. It may serve as a punishment. Nobody likes to be thrown out of town, but it is, it's just an allergy. It's an allergic reaction that it will sling you out. Yeah.
Okay, the story of Sodom and Gomorrah, that was the ultimate, you know?
Sodom and Gomorrah was,
So they did all the things and he showed them what he's gonna do, right?
and God put his foot down,
Right,
right?
now,
On the,
what do we learn from that?
what did we learn from that? We learned that there are certain evils that God does not tolerate.
Yeah. So now he has to repeat himself for every generation, different story.
Or, well, hopefully not in every generation.
Well, we couldn't tolerate that too often.
It would be bad. Yeah, we also interpret natural phenomenon in different ways. So if a volcano erupts and pours lava over a town and destroys it, we don't normally say, oh, well, God must have been punishing them for something. That's the answer that the Torah gives for why
Well, that's
Sodom
nice.
and Gomorrah are destroyed.
No, but they mentioned what happened, you know?
But that's interpretive. I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm not saying it's a wrong interpretation, but it is an interpretation. That this happened to Sodom and Gomorrah because they allowed bad things to happen there. That they promoted them, right? So there you go. Okay. Now, let's look at number 8. What you're going to see here is that, even when God and the Jewish people have a certain intense relationship, such as what we saw in, God's call to Abraham, right? Here, they're going to say that if you live outside of Israel, that itself is problematic. And they even say this in the Babylonian Talmud. All right? Our rabbis taught one should always live in the land of Israel. Even in a town, most of whose inhabitants are idolaters. But let no one live outside the land, even in a town, most of whose inhabitants are Israelites. For whoever lives in the land of Israel may be considered to have a God, but whoever lives outside the land may be regarded as one who has no God. For it is said in Scripture, that's kind of worrisome for Texas, huh? Yeah. In the story of David, they have driven me out this day that I should not cleave to the inheritance of the Lord, saying, go serve other gods. Whoever said to David, serve other gods? But the text intended to tell you that whoever lives outside the land may be regarded as one who worships idols. Right?
And yet the same rabbis stayed in Babylonia.
Yes, yes. So obviously, there was some disagreement about this, but some people at least held that outside of Israel, it's like you're not under the direct dominion of God. And they may moderate that a little bit and say that anyone who lives outside of Israel is as if they have no God. It's a little different, just a little, but still, right? So is there a place for Judaism outside the land of Israel? Well, yeah, I mean, most of these people would still say so, but only in an instrumental sense, as a preparation for when they would ultimately return to the land. Observe the laws outside of Israel so that they will not be foreign to you when you return. Right? And even among secularists for whom, God and Torah were less relevant, the idea of the centrality of the land and its, inherent connection to the Jewish people helped to motivate the formation of the Zionist movement and the establishment of Israel. Right? So in Israel, you do have this notion on the political right that, there are certain core ideas about the role of the land, and that you don't withdraw from the land, right? So so 1967, we conquered certain land, even though we didn't start the war, they attacked us from there. And so we took the whole West Bank, or you could call it Judea and Samaria, right? And so, we experienced that as part of the ancient land of Israel and as part of the land with which we have that connection through which we keep the laws or maintain a more intense relationship with God. And therefore, it's a whole different situation having those lands than it was before, and you don't ever want to let go of them. Yes, Dan?
Okay, so there's these people that you just described, talking about the West Bank and our not withdrawing from it.
Right.
The biblical borders of Israel, that everything I think that you're talking about refers to, isn't exactly what river to the sea, Baca Valley to Eilat, okay? There's a lot of other areas, Syria and Jordan, that would be conceivably considered part of the state of Israel, or the land of Israel, excuse me.
Yes.
So what did these people say about that land? We're
Yeah,
supposed to go.
So let's take, for instance, the best example of that would be the Golan Heights.
Okay.
Right? Which they don't generally define as part of greater Israel.
They don't.
As far as I know. They would say, however, that we have to keep the Golan Heights because, if you've ever stood on the Golan Heights, you will understand how dangerous it is to have guns pointed at Israel from up there, right? And that's why they would never want to return that to Syria, right? So it's very unlikely, and by the way, that's not even a religious issue for anyone in Israel. It's something that has motivated many people to settle in the Golan Heights. So, there's a pretty strong consensus about not returning Golan, regardless of people's religious inclinations or what you think about the sanctity of the land of Israel. Maybe it wasn't the land of Israel, but it damn sure is going to be now.
But let me take the Sinai. That's the land of Israel, right?
Yep.
No?
No. And that, by the way, was why Menachem Begin was much more willing to return the Sinai than he would have been to return the West Bank.
I'm trying to find an area of that part of the world that Israel doesn't currently occupy that would be considered biblical Israel?
That's not.
Well, Transjordan would be, wouldn't it?
Some people would say that Transjordan would be part of biblical
So
Israel.
the people that you're talking about, the ultra-Orthodox that believe that we should not withdraw.
Not necessarily ultra-Orthodox,
Okay.
yeah, but, generally they are Orthodox. And generally they accept the notion that the biblical land of Israel is sacred and we should not give up an inch of it.
The people you were referring to, then,
Whatever they are, the nationalist movement, the greater Israel movement.
would they suggest that in the same way that we don't withdraw from the land we've already occupied, that we should proactively go occupy the land that belongs to greater Israel? Meaning certain areas.
Yeah, not necessarily, not
So it's the
necessarily.
withdrawal.
You don't
not
hear
the
many
occupation.
people saying, oh, it's just a matter of time before we take over Transjordan.
Defining Transjordan as East or West Bank.
East Bank,
East Bank.
because after all, once upon a time, the east, part of the East Bank was also part of
There's parts
the
of the
land.
Bible, correct me if I'm wrong, that refer to greater Israel as being going clear to the Tigris Euphrates Valley.
You could do that if you want, but nobody is suggesting that we're gonna go to the
Yeah,
Euphrates.
it strikes me that their point is the land that we already occupy, we shouldn't withdraw, but not a proactive effort to occupy land. that's part of greater
There
Israel.
is not an effort to proactively make war on Jordan and retake part of the East Bank.
Okay,
Now, there are, of course, those who say, well, Jerusalem is ours, and therefore Jerusalem should all be ours, should all be Jewish, right? The Arabs who live in East Jerusalem, the people who maintain the mosque on the Temple Mount, they should go somewhere else. They do not have the power to make that happen, but they would like it to happen. They would see that as kind of, a step in the footsteps of the Messiah, which makes the Messianic idea really dangerous too. Okay, so number 9 and number 10, I want to get through this really quickly. Segment from Kings, right? It's like, the presence of the Lord fills the house of God, right? This is the dedication speech of King Solomon at the dedication of the temple, right? And it's about the special nature of the land, right? Will God indeed dwell in the earth? The heaven and the heavens of heavens cannot contain you, how much less this home I have built, yet it is special. That's the text. The Mishnah and Talmud, number 10, right? Slightly different narrative about the land. The Mishnah says, every precept, every mitzvah, which is dependent on the land, is practiced only in the land. That which is not dependent on the land is practiced both within and without the land, except for Orla and Kilayim, right? Orla is like a special piece of the agriculture which is set aside, right? The Talmud says, what does this mean, dependent? Does that mean, where it says you are coming to the land, right? Tefillin are practiced inside and outside. The redemption of a firstborn, whether an animal or a son, is practiced within and without the land, even though we talk about them as if they were coming, right? So Rabbi Judah says, This is what it means. Every precept which is a personal obligation is practiced both in and out of the land. What is an obligation of the land has force only within the land. So for instance, there are laws that relate to leaving the land fallow every 7th year. You may have heard that this year, 5782, is a Shemitah year, the sabbatical year, when they're not, so a lot of Orthodox Jews don't work the land this year. That's some interesting economic considerations there, but okay, that's how they manage. But it only has force within the land of Israel. Shemitah is not observed in South Dakota. Okay?
But on the
Yeah,
top
Lou.
it's in there.
Technical question about Shemitah.
Yeah,
So 5782 is the number, 5782 is divisible by 7
mhm,
without any remainder.
Yeah.
Okay, so is the clock that defines Shemitah the creation of the world in year 0 or year 1? Or is it when the Israelites re-established living in the land of Israel after the Exodus? Or are they both, does that happen to be a divisible year by 7?
it's a good question. I don't know the answer to that. For our purposes, it really doesn't matter, but it's an interesting question. Right? I don't know what they measure it from. I'm sure we could find out. That's a Google.
I'm sure it's this
Yeah.
number of the years divided by 7.
I don't think so. As I'm doing it in my head, maybe it is.
That's a logical thing.
Well, could be. Judaism's not always so just so you know that. But yeah, 5782, I believe, is divisible by 7.
It is, I just checked it.
Yes. You actually.
826 times.
Yes. Okay.
I'm sure that has to be.
Yeah, so you see from all of this that there are many ways to understand the centrality of the land in the Jewish story. And it relates to the question, is the land of Israel a necessary part of Judaism? And also, is it central to your identity? Right? So now we have some conversations to deal with this question of the importance of the land, and Jennifer is going to pull up the first one. We'll probably just have time.
Yossi and Shazarki, right?
I'm sorry?
This is Yossi
Yes.
Klein and Shazarki.
Yes.
Just make sure I'm in the right place.
And by the way, just so you know, the conversation is in here.
שלום, שלום וברכה. אז בוא נתחיל עם המושג הבעייתי מבחינה פוליטית, ארץ ישראל. כי בדרך כלל אצלנו כאן, בשמאל מדברים על מדינת ישראל, בימין מדברים על ארץ ישראל. האם אתה מרגיש בנוח עם המושג ארץ ישראל? כקיבוצניק, כאיש שמאל? זה מורכב, כמובן. מצד אחד אני מרגיש קשר עמוק מאוד לארץ ישראל, אני חש איזה המשך של שיח, של דורות, שארץ ישראל הייתה ארץ כיסופים. אני חושב שסבא וסבתא שלי שהקימו את הקיבוץ שאני חי בו עד היום, ואבא שלי נולד בו, והילדים שלי והנכדים שלי, אנחנו 5 דורות שם, מה שדחף אותם למעשה הציוני, הייתה איזה סוג של קונספציה על ארץ ישראל. הייתי אומר, אבל, שארץ ישראל הייתה קשורה בחזון שאני גדלתי עליו
למפעל של התחדשות יהודית, שבמרכזו המוסר, נקודה. זה העניין. זאת אומרת, אני גדלתי במקום שארץ ישראל זה היה חלום לא רק לחזור אליה ולהציל את היהודים מהגורל הדטרמיניסטי הזה של הגולה, של פרעות ושואות וכל הדברים האלה, ושל חוסר עצמאות, רוצים ריבונות, אלא שהיה פה חלום לחברה יהודית שהיא תהיה חברת מופת מחדש. בעצם חלום כמעט של נביאים, כן?
שהיה קשור למקום
ספציפי. קשור למקום הספציפי, כאילו שבעצם ניתקנו את היהודים מארץ ישראל, אז בעצם אנחנו לא מאפשרים להם לחיות כמו שצריך, זאת אומרת, לא יכולה להיות חברת מופת מחוץ לפה, ואנחנו חוזרים לפה, ופה זה המקום. זה תיבת התעודה היהודית האופטימלית ליצירת חברת מופת. זאת אומרת שארץ ישראל זה לא היה קונספט שמנותק מהחזון המוסרי שהסבים שלי הביאו לפה. אני ככה גדלתי.
מה היה המיקום של הארץ בילדותך?
תראה, זה היה אצלנו ארץ ישראל, זה היה מושא של טיולים ושל אהבה, וזה היה קשור לאתוס שהתפתח מאוד חזק, שאנחנו באנו לחיות כאן, להתפרנס מהמקום, לחדש את החקלאות, את הריבונות במובן הזה, שאנו חיים פה, באדמה הזאת, כילידים באיזשהו מובן גם. אבל אצלנו זה מההתחלה היה קשור בבנייה של חברה, זה לא היה משהו אינדיבידואליסטי כזה, אנחנו אמרנו בונים חברה יהודית, והיא תהיה החברה הטובה ביותר, לא רק פה, אלא בעולם. זה הרעיון הזה, שאנשים, שהוא רעיון מאוד עמוק מבחינה יהודית בעיניי, שאנשים קולטים מלכתחילה בסוציאליזם הזה שהם הביאו, שהוא מורכב בתוך החיים היהודיים באיזשהו אופן, שהאדם מחלק את כל מה שיש לו עם חבריו, ובעצם במובן הזה שאין רכוש פרטי לאדמה, היא שייכת לאלוהים, וככה היהודים חושבים. בעולם של הסוציאליסטי שהסבים שלי הביאו, אז זה כבר לא היה דבר דתי כזה שזה שייך לאלוהים, אבל בעצם הם הרגישו בעומק הלב שהאדמה שממנה מתפרנסים זה לא מקום עליו לעשות ניצול לרעה של בני אדם ולאסוף כסף, אלא זה מקום לעשות צדק.
האם היה בשבילם ערך מיוחד לגבי ארץ ישראל?
אני חושב שזה היה, תראה, התפיסה שלהם של ארץ ישראל הייתה תפיסה נאיבית של אנשים שגדלו וחוו את הגולה באמת בצורה מאוד קטסטרופלית. הם עלו הנה לפני השואה, אחרי מלחמת העולם הראשונה. בעצם ארץ ישראל זה היה מושג הגעגועים שלהם, זה נשב מתוך השפה, מתוך התפילה, זה היה הקונספט שפה זה יקרה. עכשיו, התיווך היה כל תנועות הנוער, החלוציות, הם היו בחלוץ, מיסודו של טרומפלדור, אז על מה שדיברו שם זה על סוג של הרכבה של סוציאליזם עם גורל יהודי שבא ליצור ריבונות פה, והחיבור הסוציאליסטי צריך היה להביא את המוסר היהודי בעצם לאיזה גוון יותר מודרני, שאפשר לדבר אותו אנשים מודרניים שהם כבר לא ממש דתיים, והגעגוע העצום שהם הביאו איתם לארץ ישראל, והחיבור הזה, זה היה המפעל שלהם. הבעיה היא שאני גדלתי, וכבר בכיתה ה' הייתה מלחמת ששת הימים, כשאני הייתי בכיתה ה', ובעצם זה היה קו השבר.
אז בשבילך, האם מדובר בשטחים כבושים, או ביהודה ושומרון, או אולי שניהם ביחד?
הבעיה שלי זה שזה שניהם ביחד. זאת אומרת שאני מרגיש משהו מאוד אמביוולנטי, אני מרגיש שיש לי משיכה למקומות האלה, דרך אגב, ככה אני מרגיש ליהדות בכלל. יש לי משיכה למסורת, וגם חשש וגם הרבה מאוד קשיים עם המסורת, כן?
אבל זה מאבק מבפנים, לא מבחוץ. אתה חלק מהסיפור הזה.
אני חלק מהסיפור, אני גם חלק מהסיפור של הקשר למקומות האלה, ואני גם חלק מהסיפור שעכשיו של המון המון הסתייגות, בגלל שאני מרגיש שהמצב הפוליטי של הישיבה שלנו ביהודה ושומרון, ב-40 ומשהו שנים האלה, זה הולך ומחלה את המוסריות שלנו עד למקום כזה שכמעט משאיר את המפעל הציוני בארץ ישראל חסר את הנקודה הפנימית שלו. ואני אומר, הרי אם מוציאים מהמפעל של הריבונות היהודית, שזה הציונות, מוציאים את הרצון להיות חברה של מופת, שהמוסר זה הלב של הדבר הזה. גם במובן של עניים ועשירים, ושל כל העניין של הצדק החברתי. ואי אפשר צדק חברתי כשאתה יושב על עם. זה לא יכול, זאת אומרת, אתה לא יכול גם להיות אמפתי לעניים שלך, של בני עמך, כאשר אתה יושב על עם אחר, ומענה אותו באופן כזה שהוא לא בן חורין בעצמו. איך ליצור ריבונות של מופת, כאשר אתה שולל ריבונות ממישהו אחר. זאת אומרת, זה בעיניי פגיעה דרמטית באפשרות לממש את הציונות, כפי שאני גדלתי עליה.
בכל זאת, אין לנו אופציה אלא ללכת על שיח ערכים.
אין אופציה אחרת.
שי, תודה רבה לך.
Give me that old time Zionism. That's all right. I haven't heard anybody talk like that.
But a very secular Zionism, right? Tied up to Jewish vision of social justice that you mentioned several times, but still independent of much of Jewish tradition.
He didn't even wear a kippah.
No, he's not what you would call an observant Jew in any respect, but has a pull to certain aspects of tradition, but he doesn't fit into the religious camp.
That's what I like most about him, though, is he has this inner dialogue going on constantly for all of his life, where there's this tension between, democratic socialism and, what that means in terms of affecting occupation of even the state of Israel.
Yeah, and I think also that there's something about thinking in Hebrew. People who think in Hebrew, you think in a fundamentally different way than if you think in English, because English is a Christian language. It just is.
How do you think that changes?
I think it changes what you wrestle with. Now, it doesn't mean, I don't think in Hebrew, so I don't, but I have made a conscious effort. I have to make a conscious effort to think in certain terms. So if I'm going to think in terms of social justice, that's something I have to push myself to do. I have to make it a priority. Whereas in Hebrew, it's part of the lingo. Right? So, and and the land itself seems to promote this ethical project of Jewish renewal. And you get how, he's tied up with that?
I get how he's tied up with that. I just don't understand the portion of it, but I'll think about it for a few years.
Yeah, well, that's a side issue. So, yeah.
Don't you think that if we have this thinking in Hebrew aspect, when a situation occurs, you go back to maybe the Torah or some learning, and that's how you react to a situation. It's like on your hard drive, you pull out this file here all of a sudden.
Yeah, and I think, for certain Jews, even if Hebrew isn't the language you think in, so maybe, that's a natural thing for you to do in your hard drive.
Yeah.
Right?
To me, a situation occurs.
Yes.
And it goes to my brain.
And you evaluate it in terms of the values with which you were raised and with which, and which you've confirmed for yourself.
Right.
Yeah. So for this guy, how does he explain the value and the special meaning of the land for himself, for his secular family?
Context, family, history.
It belongs to God, it does not belong to him.
Okay.
God has given the land.
But if you don't, but if you're not sure about God, then maybe you don't think of it that way.
Escape from fascism to establish a more equal and just place compared to where they came from.
Yes, so he made it was a very important point for him that, we didn't just do this from Jewish sources. We did it because we've been living under unacceptable conditions.
Yeah, so how do you establish yourself and do this to somebody
And
else?
we, yeah, and which is the
It's a very fair
problem
argument, yeah.
for
Very
him,
fair.
for the occupation. Yeah, Lou.
So, Herzl Zionism, as I put it together in my mind, was not so much political as it was an escape to a safe place. And that the political Zionism really grew in the 20s and 30s. Does that make sense?
It's earlier. It's earlier. Political Zionism is, it even precedes Herzl to a certain degree. It only has the energy to succeed after Herzl put certain mechanisms into process. But it doesn't start after the First World War.
Well, I don't mean start, but in terms of taking root, the seeds are there, obviously.
Well,
but-
the difference in the First World War is that instead of the Ottoman Empire controlling Israel, it's now the British Empire, right? And so that represents an opportunity. I'm sorry?
It seemed to me he made a point, that the strongest point was, we're here in the state of Israel to live Jewish values, which for him means basically socialist democracy. And if we are occupying another people, we can't do that.
Yes, yes.
We can't fulfill the Zionist dream
Yes.
by occupying the West Bank.
Now, that there are certainly secularists who would argue with that position.
Oh, yeah.
But that's his position.
That's his position.
Yeah.
Which I happen to agree with.
All right then.
So who
On
was
that
this-
note,
Who was this gentleman that they were interviewing?
Shai Zarchi. I don't remember, but he is a kibbutznik, and I think he has some leadership role within the kibbutz movement, such as the kibbutz movement is today, by the way. It's not what it used to be.
Changed now.
Okay, we'll take a break. Come back to the province.
Rabbi?
Yes.